Hello and welcome to another episode of Coffee and Code. I'm your host, Ashley Coffey, and I'm very excited to have a special guest on the show with me today, Caitlin Krause. Caitlin is a globally recognized designer, author, speaker, educator, keynote, creative, and much more. She has such an interesting background and brings so much to the world in what she does, both in her personal and professional life. And I can't wait for us to explore this conversation of this intersection of digital well-being and really embracing this moment that we're in right now. This episode is going to come out the day after the election here in the United States. And if you've been following along, things have been kind of tense. So I'm just thrilled to bring this conversation to the audience because it's a positive one. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Caitlin.
Thank you so much, Ashley. It's an absolute joy to be here. I've been anticipating this conversation for quite a while, and I just feel like we're meeting this moment at the perfect time. So thank you. With my full presence, I am so excited and happy to be joining you and having this conversation that has many different ripples.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's wild to think back to, I remember 2 years ago at AWE, or three, what is time? I met you and I was just like enthralled by the work that you do. And more importantly, I was happy to know that an educational institution is valuing what you're teaching. And I think it's so important to empower the next generation with the thought process that you teach. But let's go into like a quick story time of how like my last impression of you. It was so profound and positive. And I wanted to share that with the audience here. Is Caitlin took myself and some other audience members that were a part of a conference called AWE on this meditation excursion activity through the conference hall. I think there's about people, not 5,000, 15,000. It was wild. And
yeah, it was a big conference hall.
Huge. You guided us through meditation in the conference hall, which is, loud. There's so much happening, but you were able to get us to be centered and connected to one another. And you guided us on a path to go outside and then stand in a circle and really just kind of zoom out, I would say, and regulate. And the mirroring activity that you had us do was really fun. And I was able to connect with the person that I was with in such a deeper way than having a very surface level conversation of, hey, how are you? What do you do? Where do you work? So that's just one of the things that I wanted to mention right off the top here, that you wear many hats, but you do everything with intention and you do it very well, no matter if it's digital or physical.
Well, that exercise particularly, thanks for mentioning it, because it was something new at a conference where so often we think about things. It's cogitated from the neck up, usually with somebody on stage sharing, and there are 2D slides. And I was thinking, we're all not only spatially embodied as humans, but we design in 3D spaces. So I thought, well, how can I both give the initial presentation and then jump off the stage, do more interactive things? And this partner exercise and even the tuning in and listening to the cacophony around us was getting people to both physically inhabit their bodies and also see from a designer standpoint, we're not alone. And even recognizing the other and tuning in with awareness to an empathy of movement and gesture, beyond words. It was encouraging that animal body to also inspire us as we're creators to look beyond ourselves and out and also think in 3D. So I appreciate you saying that. I want to do more of that with my practices.
Absolutely. And if there are any conference organizers listening to that, I think bringing that amount of intentionality to your conference is important. Mental health is something that we should always pay attention to year round, not just on World Mental Health Day or Mental Health Awareness Month. But Caitlin, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? I just covered the tip of the iceberg of who you are, of wearing the educator hat. Tell us a bit more about your teachings, what you do. Who is Caitlin Krause in a nutshell?
The story of myself, Ashley, it goes back, I'd say, I don't know how far back we could go.
As a child,
decades.
I feel like your influence starts there because you have such a positive influence around you.
Okay. And this is great because I had a call yesterday where I was asking a collaborator, I had a call yesterday where I was asking a collaborator colleague what he was like at 5 years old.
Oh,
And it was funny because we dropped in and I felt my sensibility wanted to know not just what you were like, but I guess the better question is if your 5-year-old self could see what you're doing now, would she or he recognize you and say, oh, yeah, I can see that who I am now kind of leads in a nonlinear way to who you are. And
wow.
I often flip that when I get a little bit nervous or when I feel like I can't make a decision, then sometimes I ask, well, what would my 100-year-old self tell myself now? Because often the 100-year-old self kind of knows what matters and what to just like let go of.
Mhm.
And I think there's a wiser uh, attention. I also think that the childlike state has some wisdom too about your innate sensibility and what you gravitate toward. So we go through a lot of iterations and, the spiral analogy or metaphor. I feel like I'm spiraling all the time through seasons, through life, and there's some center. So when I was 5, just to give a description, I was very observant and I wouldn't say I was shy, but I was also very quiet. Like I didn't um I wasn't loud, I wasn't disruptive, but I wasn't always behaving. Like I was kind of like making up little games and stories all the time. And yeah, when I was 4, my parents were in the foreign service. We moved away from the US and I was in a foreign country just surrounded by different culture. And my child state was trying to recognize patterns in the world and also recognizing that humans are humans everywhere. Like I would make friends through sharing an activity. I remember being in preschool. I didn't understand what was happening because everyone was speaking a different language.
Hmm.
And then a boy across the table showed me in gesture what to do. And I felt that sense of belonging. And that sense of belonging was coupled with a curiosity. And I ended up slowly learning the language and stretching out and doing things. I was always really physical, like playing a lot of sports. I grew up loving to run and particularly really loving the woods and mountains and I don't know, just like
Yeah.
climbing. I climbed trees. I liked having different vantages.
Yes. Good
Um,
perspective change.
yeah, yeah. And so a real dreamer, but I never pinpointed when I was really little. I wasn't like, oh, I want to be this and do this. It was more just like an embodied state of curiosity was my go-to. And that kind of let me overcome a lot of fear. And I've used that as my kind of superpower in life. Whenever I feel afraid, I kind of lean into it like, oh, that must mean that I care about it. Like we don't feel a fear for things we don't care about.
Wow, I like that
Yeah. So
embodied
my
state
like,
of curiosity there. That is so wonderful.
yeah, yeah. So there's no, I don't know if we want to sum up my like hearing story of your life. Like, how do we sum it up? But I did study a lot of different angles of science and technology coupled with creative design and story and communication. So I was an English major in college and also wanted to potentially fly planes and do things and become an astronaut. So I also studied a lot of different technology, and that kind of led me toward immersive design.
Amazing.
Yeah, so I saw myself definitely as kind of a Renaissance thinker, where I didn't think in boxes, and my work to reform and actually reform the education system is partly based on that feeling of entrapment every time we say, oh, this discipline is separated from this one. I was like, oh, I recognize the integration. I recognize the creative practice of seeing two different disciplines and then finding a common link and forming a creative kind of application based on that
Mm,
commonality.
that's
Um,
beautiful.
I know I'm being really, it's beautiful, it's abstract, but in a concrete
Yeah.
way, I like to get my hands messy with material and kind of work in a
A
lab state.
tinkerer at heart, a maker.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, exactly. And give other people that opportunity, because I think we all need people talk about having agency. And if you have a lot of imagination, but you don't have any container to apply it to, then you can sometimes feel frustrated. So I like to provide those opportunities for freedom to people who
Mhm.
might not recognize that it exists.
Absolutely. And that reminds me, speaking of embodied state of curiosity, I can relate to that too. As a child, I was just curious. I wanted to know everything and learn everything. Not know everything, but just learn everything. And, that just everything is amazing. Like nature is amazing and the trees are amazing. The grass is amazing. And just looking at the rain dripping on the windows is amazing. It's wild, but it reminds me of an embodied state of curiosity that you inspired upon me via virtual reality, which is a modality that is wonderful to be able to embody creativity and connection. And I think it was 2021. There was a celebration of winter solstice that you helped facilitate via Engage, and it was so fun. It was so exhilarating. And I did it right here in my office, and it felt so connected, even though we were kind of feeling disconnected at the time. So thank you for that as well.
Oh, wow. You're welcome and my pleasure. And that solstice event that I usually host with Chris
Yes.
Madsen, it's one that it's been a tradition. I think traditions and rituals are things that especially during pandemic times people
Yeah.
missed. And I felt as if the solstice is kind of an opportunity to recognize literally that stillness. It means sun stands still, if only for a pause. And I thought during this busyness of holidays, how could it be possible for people to come together in a metaverse and have that mindful pause that's also curious and musical and beautiful? So I really designed um, something that for me felt like magic
Yeah.
because we can all go into states of wonder and delight if we feel that invitation to kind of drop out of the analytical brain and into the experiential. So I think the solstice experience, I've been really dedicated to not releasing the tradition. So it's been, I think the first one might have been in 2019. I can't
Oh,
remember,
wow.
but it's at least been since then that we've had successive ones in different shapes and forms. So
Amazing.
for anyone following who wants to take part, there probably will be something this year. You just have to tune into social media announcements and see.
That's so exciting. That would be coming up on 5 years now.
Yeah,
That started in 2019.
I know. I think so. Yeah.
Amazing. Wow. And that's very
Yeah.
fitting
Yeah. Different shapes, different
because
forms.
Chris Madsen, I love him so much. And he's responsible for my
Yeah.
first amazing VR experience and Engage. When I was an emerging technologies librarian, he gave us a tour of
Oh, wow.
Engage, and it was the coolest
Yeah.
thing I'd ever experienced. But because he did it with a video from Alan Watts, so it's Alan Watts narrating, and it's these like beautiful visuals, and it blew my mind. And I've been hooked ever since. So I'm always like a huge advocate of Chris because he does such a great job facilitating engagement and connection as much as you're willing to,
Mm-hmm.
and creating such a safe space to be in. And that's another thing I want to talk to you about too, is, designing safe spaces
Yeah.
and creating safe spaces, especially in this tumultuous and polarizing time. Um,
Oh, yeah.
it's wild.
Well, and it takes genuine people. Chris is a great example. Like, who's a person that can not only onboard you to what would be the logistical elements, like there's always some friction, there's always some, we want to know about the material, but it goes beyond the hardware. Like, how do we recognize that there are human, porous people with all their emotions? I think that virtual reality and augmented reality, every form of XR across the continuum involves a form of trust and a form of surrender. So you need a curiosity engagement and also something that holds the ground, like a person, a human that says, "Hey, um, this is going to be an experience that feels very real," and the fact that it's real again means that it's doing a good job. So,
Yeah.
so if you're willing to ride the ride, you want to have a certain amount of support and also a certain level of freedom to create your own journey so that people, are really experiencing it for themselves. So that's what I've worked really hard to cultivate so that everyone feels welcomed instead of thinking, oh, this medium is for a select group of people that all had to be gamers growing up. They all have to be familiar with controllers. I've liked working with people, including people at places like the State Department who are high-level leaders, and they have a lot of, maybe barriers to entry because they don't want to make mistakes. And then you say, hey, not only is this a great place to learn and to team build and to get, creative, but you can also let yourself kind of turn over that expertise to somebody else to onboard you so that you don't have to be the expert right away.
Which is a huge time saver and so efficient. And speaking of creating your own journey, I'd love to dig in a little bit further into your journey. Caitlin, you teach at Stanford. Can you tell us a little bit about what you teach and a little bit about MindWise, your consultancy? Because, like I said at the very beginning, you wear many hats. You are dipping your toes into a lot of different things, but very intentionally. So tell us a little more about what you teach at Stanford.
Sure. So I teach a course called Digital Wellbeing at Stanford. I subtitled it, well, it's Digital Wellbeing by Design, because I wanted it to be a designer course where students have that freedom to engage with it. And then the subtitle is Healthy Relationships with Technology. And it's a double meaning where it's the relationship that you have with your technology. Like right now, I don't know if do you know where your phone is?
Yes. It's like right here.
Like Ashley?
Yep.
Right. And how would you, beyond the binary, like, do you like your phone or do you have some kind of, trouble with your phone? How would you feel if you didn't know where your phone was?
That happens often because I have ADHD.
Do you get nervous? Do you chase for it? Do you have a friend call it? Or do you just kind of let it go?
It's just not meant to be.
I love that. You're like, it's not.
But I do have a little thing on my Apple Watch that I can ping it where it's at. So after I've, given up hope of maybe now is not the right time, I do ping it and try to find it.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're living in this kind of awkward time to be human where sometimes I think unwittingly people start to think of their phone as an extension of themselves. Like it's sort of, I don't know, it might feel weird if somebody else, it's personal. If someone you don't know just walked up and took your phone and started like bebopping on it, you might feel a little bit invaded.
Violated.
Usually the only person you give your phone to is someone who's taking a picture, of you or someone who you acknowledge. And Jeever Tully, who started the tinkering school in the Northwest, he had a certain design workshop that I was part of where he talked about tools and humans and tool making. And he said that anytime we use something to do something with and we use our hands, it becomes a psychological extension of ourselves.
Wow.
Like we don't say, I used the rake to rake the yard. We say, I raked the yard, and we used a rake, but we kind of just don't acknowledge it. Or I say, I wrote in my journal. I don't say the pen wrote in my journal, like powered by my hands. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like I use a tool. So and I know right where mine is too. I use my phone, and yet it's not a phone anymore. It's a device, and it has its own devices sometimes that operate on us psychologically. So part of the course is kind of investigating the relationship that we have, not just with phones, but with all of technology with a capital T. Like, what is this? How is this impacting our psychological state, our well-being? Ideally, how are we thriving using technology? And the other double meaning of healthy relationships with technology is the human-to-human relationship and the human-to-nature relationship mediated by tech. Like if tech is a bridge for that connection, is it serving as a barrier or is it actually bringing us closer to other humans and to our connected state in the physical world? Ideally, that's the case. I bring all of this up. Each topic in the course is a bead on a necklace. And I love getting to interact with students because it's an elective course where I have people from the business
Nice.
school, people from the School of Medicine, yeah, people from all over the place, and nursing students, med students. It's awesome because it's this open course where undergraduates can take it and graduates, and it's one class that I teach as I also have a business.
It's amazing.
So before I describe MindWise and my company, did you have any other questions about like the structure at Stanford or anything? I
Yes.
mean, Stanford's a whole place to teach.
My
So
biggest question is, what questions are students asking of you in this context? I'm curious what themes that you see. I think that's the biggest
yeah,
curiosity there, and especially as it's discipline agnostic, it sounds like. And some students I feel like are, hesitant to new things, and some are like all in. What are you hearing from your students?
yeah, that's a great question. Students, without being too generalizing, I'd say one theme, a theme that I've pointed out is loneliness because the Surgeon General recognizes it as an epidemic. So we talk about the state of connection. Most of the students, even though we have some continuing ed students that come back to Stanford as people in their 30s. I've had students in 30s, 40s, 50s,
Wow,
people who come here MBAs in the business school and they end up taking this
amazing.
course. Uh, but primarily, the students that are in the class are Gen
Okay,
Z, and even some Gen A. So it would be like ages 18 to 23, most
okay.
common. And what they come in asking, gosh, there's so many cases, but I would say one case is a student who comes in very quiet and will start to stay after, like class 2 or 3, and will say, um, by the way, I've been up late at night. I can't sleep because I just keep doom scrolling or I keep like engaging in something that's not a healthy
Wow.
pattern. So one of the themes that comes up is like self shaming and blaming and kind of feeling really negative and coming to the class looking for new
Mm.
ways. And I tend to avoid the word habit. We could talk about that. I just think sometimes habit formation sounds really reductive and kind of like we are establishing healthy habit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But but patterns and rituals and habits that become a choice, like an intentional choice. I want
Mm.
students to embrace that and to see. So a lot of this is kind of like an unlearning or a moving away from guilt and shame to just kind of naming without attaching um, negative emotion to the self. I want students to come and feel um, a sense of welcome, a sense of grace, a sense of safety. So we have a lot of collective norms that we establish at the beginning
Mhm.
about our room and our community being a really safe space to come and share and explore and get creative and playful and soulful. So one of those themes is definitely just kind of casting away guilt and shame, but also naming the state of affairs as they are. And students going through creative design principles, because I have some coming in who say, not only am I a computer science major, but I've decided I want to apply my knowledge to digital therapeutics. I want to build something, I want to create something. And they're coupling my course with the practical application of their coding
Wow.
and saying, hey, let's do this. And so I have a component in the class that's a like an application portfolio that we build toward the crescendo at the end of the quarter is the students taking those beads on the necklace and they each focus on a different theme of digital well-being. And then in the portfolio, they can sometimes some of them will storyboard that app or they'll play out like what they would want to build in the future and they've gone through the creative design iteration with me that helps kind of build that base. So yeah, so that's another theme that I love to introduce.
I love
And
it.
students seem to be, yeah, they meet this moment. My job, I don't see my role as a converter. Like I will introduce them to virtual reality. I won't say you have to love XR. You have to, because I feel like sometimes people feel like they're kind of forced to love
Yeah.
technology in a tech rich course. I want people to feel like, okay, they can be critical. I just don't want them to be cynical.
Mhm.
I really open up because I feel like we've lived in a world that, without even acknowledging it, it's laced with a lot of sarcasm. It's kind of like, the media can sometimes be flip and like, okay, here we are in this world and let's just not trust anything because even truth has become kind of subjective. And
Yeah.
and I want students to say like, hey, I can be critical of this world. I can be conscious. I can be conscientious, but I'm not going to go in um, believing that everybody and everything is out to get me. And believe it or not, some very intense, just to be at Stanford often, takes a lot of hard
Oh my
work.
gosh,
And
yeah.
so they're very competitive. So when people come in, having that class where we say, intentionally that we're not going to be cynics, or at least they'll see me modeling a person that embodies hope. That's been a real, I've heard from students that that means a lot to them, that they get to feel invited to change their outlook.
That is profound
Yeah.
because that has the ripple effects to create real change and honestly, like, help with
I hope so.
self-awareness and healthy coping strategies because we can't get rid of technology. It's
Yep.
inherently going to be a part of everything that we do. And I applaud
Mhm.
those students for having the self-awareness and asking the questions and staying after class. And that's really wonderful
Yeah.
that you're bringing that to them. And I'm glad that you mentioned the Surgeon General's warning because I was going to mention that as well. It's like, it's wild that
Yeah.
with all of these incredible technologies that have these fast chips and processing, we're able to do things so quickly now. And yet we're in an age of such loneliness, which is wild. So I think now more
Yeah.
than ever, connection is very, very important.
Well, and students say, there's these funny acronyms like FODA.
What's that?
Let's see if I can do the math right now. Let's see, 2024, pandemic started in 2020. So if students are between 18 and 23, that means maybe they were 13 or 14 to age, I don't know, 18 during like heart of pandemic isolation time.
Mm,
So FODA stands for fear of dating again or fear of doing anything, because doing new things and taking risk, it's kind of like if you've been a little bit physically sheltered, it can feel strange to your physical body to do things like approach another person or
how
like
do I
try to
behave?
like a healthy, yeah, how do I behave and what are the rules of engagement, no pun
Yeah.
intended, but like how do we go beyond our comfort zone and take a risk with another human saying, hey, I like you beyond, so part of this, we do address things like digital dating and relationships and how people are not just social on social media, but like navigate those steps to not being lonely and to feeling like it's safe to trust environments where sometimes people are communicating only using emojis. And we use a lot of humor, in class, because if you're like so staid and serious, like, oh, we must all, again, like I use robot arms a lot, but it's like because I'm a human over robot
Yep.
who can work in a world of robotics. But yeah, you kind of need that. So I don't know. I feel like I'm so grateful, Ashley, that I get to, that I not just have a role, but I get to be an educator who can learn from students and bring up things. Because I point out in my book, which we'll get to later, but I point out that I think this generation is kind of the canary in the coal mine. Like they're very vocal about what they're feeling and experiencing. And so Gen Z and Gen A are kind of pointing to other generations. I think it's a signal, like we're all experiencing a certain amount of loss and isolation in different ways and loneliness. Like we all want belonging and
Yeah.
connection. But it doesn't have to mean that belonging means conformity or that we all have to be the same. So what it can look like, including digital well-being, is more of a dynamic construct where it should meet us. It should meet us where we're at. We should respond to it both with our physical, emotional, our cognitive, and also different dimensions of our presence, and say, how does it feel to be me? Like who am I in this world, and how can I augment my experience with technology as I wish and not by mandate?
I think that's an important thing to remember here is the choice here. And I think you're helping empower your students to help them understand the choice and autonomy that we have and the tools that we work with and the tools that work as extensions of our bodies and us and our communications. And I'm curious in terms of has there been a profound moment during your teaching where you've really kind of it's all kind of come together in a aha moment? Have you had that, and what has that moment been like?
Well, I think I'm like, I'm playing around right now with things like books and journals. So if you see me looking down, it's because I'm a
I
tinkerer.
love it. I've got
And
my brain and
yeah.
my tinker toys and my yeah, trust me.
I've got like rock and leaf and
Nature. We
all
love
all
it.
kinds of fun. There's a lot of fun
For
happening.
sure.
Um, I think this is a nice stage to kind of ripple out and in again, because the part two of what I do as a teacher and mentor actually applies to people of all ages, because 10 years ago, I founded a company called MindWise. And I was moving back to the States. I'm originally American. I was born in Boston. And I've lived as a child of people in foreign service
You lived in
and
Russia for a
adults.
brief time. I think you attended
Yeah,
nursery school there.
yeah, yep. Russia, and then went through international school as a
That's
student,
so cool.
then back to the US. Yeah, it was really amazing just growing up, moving around and being surrounded by different languages. As an adult, I moved to Brussels to teach. So I lived there for 2 years, working and teaching in an international school, and then moved to Zurich. And I was in Switzerland and teaching in the international school. I was always also a curriculum designer, looking at integrated curriculum and models that looked beyond the individual classroom. And this was on top of a background as a programmer. So I made a lateral switch to education after a tech background to really look at these intersectional fields of learning. And I was always motivated by the human body and brain and how we get in our most creative state. So fast forward, it was about 2015. So we're going on almost 10 years of my
Wow,
company. I was
congratulations.
in
That's
Switzerland.
huge.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I was living in Switzerland and I was biking to and from work.
Amazing.
I didn't have a car, and going up and down those hills. I was just thinking, um, working with a lot of adults. I'd also been leading a lot of workshops for people who were, founding startups and doing things with immersive tech. And I had caught the VR bug by then. And I was thinking about the brain and the body and how we connect storytelling, design, and qualities of mindfulness. Like how do we get into a flow state with our most creative presence? So I decided then, and it was something, if anyone listening has something that just keeps you up at night where, you almost can't sleep and you feel like if you don't do this thing, you're not playing your instrument the way it's meant to be played. Like you just know that you have this ability. So I wanted to found this company. I wanted to do this, and I kind of just needed my own internal nudge. So I founded this company that I called MindWise, and that was in 2015. And no doubt the M is kind of like the Swiss
Oh, I
mountains,
love
and the
that.
W is like the water or the birds. Like the mind wise, when people ask me about symbolism, there's so much there with like mirrors and balance. And you look at the logo and there are two birds that mirror each other, kind of looking out at the world. And I thought, my value is freedom, and my value is to give other people feelings of imagination freedom that also has that vehicle. So I started to develop this business that just had applications and technology, and the primary state was physical, like that storytelling, that design, that mindfulness, where people could feel a sense of presence and then rise to different creative applications in business, in education, in their design of how they approach. So I was working with a lot of applied design thinking, taking my background. I have an MFA in creative writing, by the
That's
way. So
amazing.
I
I
didn't
saw
mention
that.
this yet, but I yeah. So it's thank you. It feels like my creative animal wanted to find that vehicle where I could bring everything that I had designed and learned as a tech person and also an educator and containing multitudes, and bring that to the world at a time when I already knew AI was on the rise. Like, we were already talking about AI in like 2016, 2017. And I just knew that what makes a human was going to be integral in this emergent state. People would need that bounce, need that sense of play. So yeah, so my background as upper middle school teacher, high school teacher, then moving to teach at Stanford while I still have my company as my primary role. So my primary job with MindWise is also as an educator, because I'm kind of leading people as a mentor, saying, "Hey, you're going to be in charge of your way, and here are some tools and avenues and frameworks that are going to help." And my work in virtual reality lets me not just build worlds, but build experiences that let people kind of loosen their grip on attachment to one fixed mindset, one fixed identity. Like, people have so many opportunities using technology that's immersive to embody something that feels both very real and also very surreal. So back to your question, I think one of my greatest surprise, or I think if I'm reframing, one of my biggest learnings, um, is that this is called Admara's law, that we over-index tech for the short term, and then we sometimes underestimate the long-term impact. And like, in the beginning of my teaching career, I still had the same values that I do today about integrity and intentionality and creative play and design. And I think that even I couldn't totally understand the impact of the long game. Like, everything I was doing then built toward today. And I'm sure the things we're talking about today are going to like have a ripple into whatever happens in 2030 and 2040. It's like we're in the river.
Isn't that cool to think
And
about?
yeah, yeah. And every day, the people that we interact with, if we're open enough and we're not like, I know the
Yes.
way, I know the way. If we're like, hey, you too, you're here. Like, what do you have to say? I feel like I'm always learning from other people. So part of what I love about being an educator is that I get to listen.
What a joy. That's the
Yeah.
gift of being able to hear those different perspectives. And I hope for everyone listening is that they have the chance to explore those perspectives outside of your own state, country. It just really adds to the spice of life, I would say. And
Yeah.
I appreciate that a lot. And I'm so happy that the students are seeing the value in that. And you're right. I think the pressure on that generation right now that you mentioned is a lot, and even more so than like our generation when we were in college, because there's this whole other layer of digital aspect and digital identity. Whenever I was in college, I feel like you had two different lives. You had your digital life, and then you had your real life, like your IRL life. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
I had those moments of where it was okay if my digital life was just kind of on hold for a little bit, because it was my little MySpace corner, my little Zynga corner. It didn't matter if my background was updated or
Yeah.
whatnot. It's just changed so much over time, and this our lives have merged together, and we
Mm-hmm.
are our own historians at the same time. Like, we're writing our digital signature into the digital interwebs out there. And sometimes I think people forget how profoundly important that is. I'm curious if that has come up in discussion in your classroom, of like how what you put on the internet is out there and it can be reflective. What does that look like in your classroom?
Well, and it's funny. I think I'm going to frame even beyond, because
It's
the things that I'm saying actually apply to work that I've been doing with the Air Force,
amazing.
and with communities at TED and the Foreign Service, because I have a lot of like a lot of clients that I'm working with have said that they are starting to keep separate. I mean, it's been kind of ubiquitous, that separation of public and private self has formed a dichotomy in identity that sometimes is both healthy security, but also unhealthy in terms of just imagine if our life is a Mobius strip. I use this kind of metaphor a
Yeah.
lot with people in communities and professional communities, especially. Leaders want to show up and be authentic and be reachable. And so a lot of my coaching, my teaching has been through leadership programs where people see, oh, I can have a more integrated self where I look at my positioning in my brand and I do have a public facing image, but it's not separated from my feeling of wholeness. Like I don't have to protect my identity as a core human so much that other people can't reach me and see me. Like how do we become that well-being state that has vulnerability and authenticity also in the voice that we're telling our stories and sharing with our audiences and really having an influence and an impact. And I think that's the future state of even looking down, even writing this
Yes,
book, Digital Wellbeing, like
I love that.
coming up in November. I'm doing a 4-week leadership
Okay.
course alongside Andy Fidel and Spatial
No
Networks.
way.
We're doing a course for,
That's
yeah.
awesome.
So it's just about to launch.
Perfect.
So starting mid-November, I believe it's Wednesday, November 16th. That's the first
Mark your
day.
calendars,
We're
listeners.
working we're working with a group of leaders to take these principles and say, okay, what should matter for well-being that also addresses topics like social media and healthy cadence of how much attention we pay
Mm,
to technology. Because when we match our attention with our intention and we start with our intentionality, this is a level up for a lot of people, including students, people of all ages saying, how do I show up in this very noisy world and be intentional about that? And for some people, it's going to be about disengaging completely from social media. And for other people, they're not able to do that. Or, last week I had a dinner at TED AI during that conference. There was a dinner that was honoring this book launch, and a person was there who is a leader in her company, high profile figure, and also has a newborn baby.
wow.
And she was saying, I cannot go away. Like I cannot disappear from the world. Even if she wanted to, she can't, deactivate accounts and, not have alerts coming up. But we worked together and came up with some of the practices, that could help give her a better sense of freedom and
Wow.
agency about both the time of day, how to have certain moments that I call a garden space where you just have it for yourself and it's secure and you have buffers. It's like human rituals are going to get even messier. And so how with all of that friction, um, even working from home is something that can be freedom, but it's also like, back to, I don't know if you had this tenet in college, but they'd say don't study in your dorm room because it'll mean that you can't sleep.
I never heard
like
that.
like if we do
Wow.
it, if we do, there's actually evidence that our body is very spatially
Yeah.
oriented. So if we do everything in one physical space, and this is where metaverse can actually
Yeah.
help because it creates a new placemaking. If we place in space multiple things in the same physical environment, then we start to kind of muddy waters and edges of where are the boundaries and what are we. So yeah, so
Oh.
I won't ramble into
No,
all
but I
those
have a
tips, but
follow-up
I have
question
a
for
good
you
tip. Okay,
on that.
this is great. I love how we're jazzing, by the way. I really appreciate that you let me
Of
jazz
course.
on this
This is
podcast.
all this is about having a great conversation, bringing it to a larger audience, and hopefully someone learns something
Yeah.
new at the end of it. And that's considered a win. But I'm glad that you brought up working with your clients because that's another thread that I wanted to pull here is that you are unique in the sense that you've been able to make the intangible tangible, but also provide the
Yeah.
business case to your clients. And that's really great to hear like that the Air Force would care about something like that. I'm curious, are you seeing people that are more on the proactive and the reactive side? And what are some key elements of like the business use case that you're seeing with your clients? It sounds like you're helping them design to optimize and economize.
Oh, that's a great way to phrase it. Helping them to Yeah, optimize and economize. And I like that too, because it kind of flips the script. Sometimes the word optimize is used again in a really robotic
Yeah.
way, but this is proactive optimization that doesn't take out the nuance, like the ability for people to take tips and practices and have them be invitational and not
Hmm.
prescriptive. Uh, Use cases, naming the problem statement. Uh, Cases like the Air Force led me to talking with top suicidologists and
Wow.
people that are studying why leaders, Gen Z and A, different populations have higher rates of stress and burnout, and suicide is on the rise. And I just feel like naming this moment, it's also in the book, interview and data, and working with clients that are in these high intense fields sometimes leads to my avenues of doing resilience
Hmm.
training, like well-being can be treated as a construct for systems and not just for an individual. And if you can train more groups to embody well-being, it actually means that you can name when you need something and not feel like you're guarded and you have to be perfect all the time or be, always on your game. The best systems, even if we use biomimicry and we look to nature, how is nature most resilient? It really is a co-sensing system where it's not putting all the pressure on one individual. So so
Wow.
I love working with teams and groups. Having this well-being and creative practices also address resilience and giving people both active practices they can use. And then the level two is to have me also being an onboarding person who can move into embodied metaverse
Mm.
states or let people know how to use technology in a really mindful way as they deploy it. And I appreciate that I can work on programming that's both non-binary, not being like, oh, we're either physical or we're
Uh-huh.
tech. Like places will fly me there to work in person with a team. And then we'll also say, hey, what's your ability? Do you have capacity to give headsets to 20 people on a team? And then sometimes teams do, and they say, hey, and we want to work together. So we have programming that then builds over time where I'll be the facilitator who lets people know this is how you can adopt technology in a really mindful way to increase your sense of presence together, because a lot of leaders want to have that hands-on collaboration with
Hmm.
others, and they know that we're moving into more 3D environments, even if it's slow to adoption. I think something that people are starting to realize with the theme of AI is that all of 3D future technology is built upon AI
Yeah.
systems. So my book is subtitled In the Age of AI, and I talk about AI and practices and how people can use knowledge about AI and AI tools as leaders and not feel afraid of it. And then also, it's it's not separated from the topics that you and I thrive with, which are the XR, the metaverse states, the virtual reality. So anyone listening, if you think um, you're familiar with things like Meta Ray Bans or like new Snap glasses, and you want to talk about augmented reality, like a lot of this has the digital well-being thread underneath it because you don't want to adopt a new technology without thinking about the human thriving.
Yeah.
So so I use the design principles to meet with leaders and talk about both the what of the technology, the layer stack, and have that layer stack built upon human frameworks and human-centered design.
I love that you do that, Caitlin. Thank you, because in my work as a
Thank
technology
you.
consultant, I've noticed really all it boils down to is the human part of it. Of either it's a behavior change or an educational opportunity or an opportunity to help
Yep.
improve the communication. There is always at the end of the day communication. At the end of the in its different
Yeah.
forms.
Yeah. And people need us sometimes as that fresh kind of new voice in the mix, because if you're internally in a company and you don't have that kind of outsourced expert, then you sometimes don't know what you're
Hmm.
missing. And areas like HR, they're in charge of a lot of people. And then there's this pressure to advance and always have the next thing. And AI is more than a flash in the pan. It's not just extra noise or saying, oh, how can I take these tools like Canva and make them pop? It's also, what's the philosophy of my adoption of AI and how am I using it? So I feel like, for you, I I feel like I already know the answer is yes, but having you in the mix or having me come in just lets them level up and know that they don't have to do it all by themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make sure to put a link to your book in the show notes. That way everyone can get to it. And I'm definitely going to buy one for my business coach because it sounds like perfect, right up her alley. Um, it's fascinating to
You're
me how
awesome.
you've been able to do that. And I'm glad that you mentioned some of the business use case there and this journey of integrating your experiences. I want to call out is that you never had this like idea of like, I want to do that. It was a journey of following your passions and the
Yeah.
curiosity and like, earning a degree and earning these new appointments. Those have been the cherries on top as a result of you following your
Yeah.
passions. And I think that's really important for young people to hear, really to follow your
Yeah.
passions. Don't think that there's a title to everything. It's really about designing your life, like you said. It, anything is
Yep.
negotiable, therefore everything is designable.
I love it. Yeah. Yeah. And it's intrinsic and it's emergent. And if you can't predict it, that's how you know you're really living. Because, sometimes we predict ourselves into our own realities, like we're just doing what's
Yeah.
expected. But like the surprise is where you learn. And yeah, and another thing that came up for me a lot is joy. Like like you kind of choose joy, choose wonder. These are skills. Like as soon as you start to flex that muscle, it becomes stronger. And so, yeah, starting out, you might not realize, but I've been thinking a lot about fractals lately and about how if a theme is emergent, sometimes the bigger picture is like that fractal unveiling of a pattern that can expand. Um, yeah, so your inner if something is meeting this, like I've been listening a lot somatically to what gives me a feeling of a full body lift or what
I love
gives me a
that.
feeling of a
What have you
rise.
noticed?
And, well, I've noticed for me that it starts kind of in my visceral like core, like my gut. Like my gut really knows beyond the metaphorical, like the physical
Like the
self
alignment of
kind
energy,
of.
like there's truly something that the chakras.
Yeah. And I know what I'm drawn to. And I've been joking with people that I'm a recovering pleaser.
Mm.
And they laugh, but it's like, oh yeah, is my job to make everybody happy?
Nope.
Then that sometimes boils down to least common denominator because then you can always be paying attention to, the explosions instead of the lift. And when you feel the body lift, it's like, wow, your job is to shine. Like everybody might have a different way of doing it. But if you give into that goodness, then that's going to attract more of that. And then it's not easy. It's hard. It takes practice, but you're not alone,
Yes.
you
And
know?
I think
Yeah.
it's really easy. And I think it's important to remind people that to get there, you have to be present in the current moment and have that awareness to observe. And I see so many people
Yeah.
just so disconnected these days of being there physically, but mentally not being there or being there on their phones, right? Like you got to be able to pay attention to that in your real environment.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you don't have it, it can be like be kind to
Mhm.
yourself because it can be a double spiral. Like if you recognize, ah, I don't have that. Oh my gosh. I've learned like, okay, take a breath. Like the breath really can work wonders in like bringing us back, self-regulation, like just taking a deep breath in through the nose and letting the chest fill with air. And then I exhale. And I sometimes do a body scan from bottom of my feet to my head, to the top of my head as I'm breathing. I notice how to make my breath slower on the exhale than the
Mhm.
inhale. So I'll exhale and just like let my shoulders drop. And as I'm scanning from toe to top, then sometimes I've started to get playful and scan from left to
Ooh,
right. Like just say, oh, how do my fingertips feel on my left
okay.
hand? Can I feel them? And then I move up my arm and I come across my chest, and then I'm moving toward my right side and out my fingertips. And as I'm breathing and doing that body scan from like feet to top of head and then like left to right, suddenly I realize like, oh yeah, I'm three-dimensional in the world. And you just kind of start to come back, like to sand away rough
Oh,
edges.
okay.
There's a lot of lots of noise, but yeah, as you said, like we're here, you're safe, you got this.
Absolutely. You've got this, whoever's listening and watching.
Yeah.
I love
hmm
that. I'm curious, Caitlin, what is your vision for MindWise in the next 10 years? Like, what does that utopian vision look like for you, or the goal, or just what you're working towards in that future state?
Yeah. My purpose, like the mission statement that has been calling to me for the past, I guess, 10 years of MindWise has been empowering meaningful human connection. Um, the next 10 years, I think, will be the through line through experience, through wonder, through awe. We're gonna explore a lot about how, because I think right now I feel very solid with my why.
Yeah.
But like Simon Sinek,
Yeah.
like know your why. I
Start with
know
why. I love
why
that book.
I'm in the, yeah, start with why. And I kind of think I know what. Like I understand some of the tools that are out there right now. And even just coming from having this book, Digital Wellbeing, that has all of this text in it, what's been calling out to me for the future of MindWise is to look at the how of experiences where other people can experience this. So, for example, I've been looking at things like a spatial sound
Ooh.
garden. These are things that I've been working on that people who are, people following and listening, I know in the show notes, we'll have things like my newsletter, things that are ways to follow and stay in touch with me in community. I've been inviting people to take part in experiences that hinge on the book's exercises and tenets, but what are ways to make that personal for each of our lives? Because I would like to be helping with a movement. There's a whole movement to elevate and to look at ways to integrate well-being with
Mhm.
technology and not disappear from our physical integrity. So
Wow.
I feel like I'm a leader that wants to build that movement and help people.
I like that. And you're in the perfect place to do that. And you're the perfect person to do that. Because you're in
Yeah.
California. You're in like the center where all this is happening. And it's interesting to see kind of how it's
Yeah.
playing out right now with policy and legislation in the US, just in the context of
Yeah.
AI privacy and what the EU currently
Well, I was going
has.
to
It's
say,
wild. It's a
yeah.
wild world.
Yeah. And working with AI, it's like, how can I be in the next 10 years fully present to be both that person who invites the exercises and also integrates so that we're meeting this AI moment in a really mindful way that doesn't just disappear from the matrix, but has a way to offer navigation tools because we all need that.
Yes, I 1000% agree with you. And two things came to mind in that I wanted to bring up is the reminder to people on the design of apps. Like we're still very early, if you think about it, in the world and the context of apps being designed and the research that's coming out of that. And
Yes.
apps are inherently designed for us to stay in them. At the end of the day, Meta, Instagram, Facebook, these are businesses that run off of ads. And the longer you stay there, the more beneficial that is. So, whatever keeps you coming is what will keep you. It's just, I think it's an important reminder to tell people that to help with some of that self shame and reminding them that, like, okay, you're human, you're human.
Yep.
You were following the design, and you just didn't realize it. But having the awareness of, I think, realizing it is really important. Because I found myself I find myself falling into that sometimes with like, I find myself,
And hopefully that'll change.
thank you. Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We all have fallen into that. And I think, Ashley, I'm hoping that even just by naming that this is the way the algorithms are working right now, hopefully there's a future social tech that isn't based on the dopamine spikes, giving people almost what they want, but not always what they want. It's a gambler's kind of addiction
Mm-hmm.
model. So Charlie Munger has a quote: if you want to measure the outcomes, look at the incentives.
Ooh.
And incentive 1.0 was engagement model of like keep them engaged as long as possible. But model 2.0 could still have social media or still have these apps, but have it not be based on those engagement models. So that's what I'm actually on advisory to help build at a lot of really special places. So tune
Incredible.
in,
I can't wait.
follow, good things coming.
Yes, well, that's a
Yeah,
good question.
yeah,
Where can people find you and follow
yeah.
you and get on your newsletter and all that good stuff? I'll make sure to put it in the show notes, but I want to hear from you.
Yeah. Okay. So, it really is a great time. The word emergent could be a theme of this podcast because we're emerging and elevating. I guess elevate would be the other one.
Merge, elevate. I like
I
that.
am coming out of, yeah, I'm coming out of a year of focus for this book. So this book took about 9 months to a year to write.
It's
And
beautiful, by the way.
with this,
Congratulations. That just
thank you.
deserves some flowers. That's a
It makes me
big
really happy.
undertaking.
Thank you. So we're still in launch phase because it just came out about a month ago. And so people can find me. I'm doing a book tour. There are a lot of different events that if people follow me on social media, LinkedIn is a great place. Instagram, I post on, I share. People can write to me one-on-one on LinkedIn and I will write back. And I say all of this because I engage with social media mindfully. I want to use it to elevate connection, and I know how to set boundaries for myself, for my
Mhm.
well-being. And I encourage other people not to feel like they have to drink from a fire hose. But if they do want to come to my website, CaitlinKrause.com, they can find information that's both about the book, resources, some of the materials, and then there's an option to sign on for a newsletter where sometimes I'll post if I have events coming up, or like I was mentioning, the 4-week leadership course. That's something where people can opt in. And, I always want to be offering ways, kind of like that spiral,
Mhm.
for people to have a core nexus
Mhm.
of direct, direct sensibility, like direct relationship if they want to have a real time interaction with me or with somebody in a community that I help to build, then they can get that. And then they can also have that disseminated. Like some people love to take text. I love
Me
reading,
too.
and they like to read in the quiet of their home, like with the time. And then they might think, oh, that's interesting. I want to reach out. So I'm an ambivert. I'm both an introvert and an extrovert. And everybody listening, I know everybody has their own cadence and their own way to connect. But I'm definitely dedicated to this work, and I want to offer ways that people can hear me whisper, "You're not alone. Yes, keep doing what you're doing." Yeah,
I
yeah.
love that.
So
And that's not
that's
your first book.
that's the short. No, it's my fifth book.
Amazing.
It's my
I love
I
it.
have books of poetry. I have 3 books of nonfiction. Yeah, there's Mindful by Design about my teaching practices and mindfulness and design strategies. Then there's also Designing Wonder, going into wonder, spatial tech, and
Ooh.
and design. And digital well-being is just this. I feel like this is the culmination of a lot of different integrated topics with leadership and AI and the digital well-being of the future.
Highly
And there are
anticipated.
2 books of poetry. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you you're just not only kind, also you're you're in this field as a leader. So I feel like you, Ashley, having this podcast and mentioning the long game. Yeah, that's what comes up for me. Just that you've walked the walk, and you're also, for us people who are writers and um, multi-dimensional beings, it's just really nice to meet live in our human form here, and talk to other people about how they can build what they want to build, and they can use these tools right now to help
Thank
others.
you.
I'm really grateful for you. Thank you.
Likewise. And like these conversations fill my cup so much in so many ways because this is the spice of life. Technology is constantly going to be changing. And I feel like your key unlock is helping people find that approachability to understand and embrace our unique individuality while also embracing change and innovation and creativity, but also play. Because creativity and play and technology go hand in hand together. And you can try and you can fail and you
Yeah.
can do all those things without fear, which is the best thing.
In fact, if you're not playing and trying and doing all that without fear, or embracing fear and bouncing with it, then I feel like there's something missing. Like if you haven't actually ever found your edge, it's like I want to encourage everybody, feel some discomfort, like feel that rigor that lets you know that, things are pushing back because again, you're not
Yeah.
alone. And that's as you said, that's the spice of life. If you don't have some of that, then, you know, maybe you need to try it.
Yeah, try it
You know?
by visiting because we'll be
Yeah.
at AWE again next year, which
Mm.
is, a conference we go to, Augmented World Expo in
Yes,
California. It's my favorite, one of
exactly.
my favorite conferences. It feels like coming home.
Mine
I
too.
see familiar faces, but I
It's
love
awesome.
meeting new ones, and it's wonderful to hear. I just love the melting pot of the community from around the world, not just the US, and that's
Absolutely.
the wonderful perspectives. But I wanted to
Yeah.
ask you a question. I have these random questions that I like to ask people. And I know you're a Jim Henson fan, so I think you'll appreciate this. Is if you were to choose to be a Muppet for a day, what Muppet would
Oh
you
my,
be, Caitlin, and why?
oh my gosh. Wow. This is an amazing question. Yes. Oh my gosh. I have no idea why the first, okay, well, I mean, the count is a lot of fun, but I was thinking about Grover. I have
Oh.
no idea why Grover appeals to me.
Mm.
And I think it's because Grover is very emotionally available. You kind of know how Grover's feeling. Like Grover likes, of course, I'm kind of wearing Grover
Yeah,
color
yeah.
today for anyone who's watching physically. Um, but yeah, Grover just feels like a character that is looking up and kind of open and also vulnerable. So I feel like I'm, I grew up loving Jim Henson. I got to meet Jim Henson when I was
That
little,
is so
and he
cool. I did
inspired
not
my
know that.
entire life practice. Yeah, yeah, and I mean the story goes, Jim Henson came, um, and I'll tell it like I was a kid. Jim Henson came with Kermit. So I not only met Jim Henson, but I met Kermit when I was really little, and they were performing for us at the embassy overseas in Russia. And this was just a really special time. So as a child, I thought, wow, I met Jim Henson and I met Kermit. And Jim Henson was kind of like Mr. Rogers talked to kids. Jim Henson talked to kids like we were on his level. Like he knew how to engage with me. He made me feel totally special, imagination rich. And I remember our conversation was just, you know, just I knew him. I knew him. And he was he was inspiring. And my parents told me that something happened, like he was performing, of course, and he was Kermit, like he was being
Hmm.
Kermit. And the kids were in front of the stage, and there was no way for Jim Henson to come out to meet us without revealing the back of it. So on his hands and knees, he crawled out the window so he could then come in the door as Jim Henson and meet us.
Oh.
And so it was really funny because my parents said he had such a high level of integrity, like he didn't want to break your belief.
Oh.
And so he crawled, like he
That's
just sort of did a crawl out. Yeah, so I got to meet both him and my hero Kermit when I was little, and I mean, yeah, he
amazing.
changed my life.
For real, that I feel
Hmm.
like the magic of Jim Henson, you
Yeah,
were touched by it that day.
I,
And
s-
it continues to,
I
that's the
was,
beauty of
yeah.
what Jim Henson does. It's like he's able to continue that imagination. I just,
Oh yeah,
oh, it's so cool. I feel like,
I still get goosebumps.
yeah, I can imagine. I mean,
Yeah.
I wish he were still alive
Uh-huh.
today just to see the advancement of technology and how far we've come. But what an OG when it comes to being authentic, and that level of
Yeah.
integrity, right? Just so sweet. So sweet.
Yeah. Amazing human.
Oh, that's so
Wow.
cool.
So
Um,
Thank
Oh,
you.
so Grover. Okay, I like that. That's a good one.
Uh-huh.
Um, wow. Okay. Well, I was just, this is a great conversation, Caitlin, and we can have so many more conversations. And I'm just thrilled that you were able to have a conversation with me. I know you're super busy, you do a lot of things, and this has been a long time coming. And I'm so glad that our paths have crossed and intersected. It's wild we talk about these like fractals and these different parallels. I feel like we've had similar things happen. Like before we got on the call, we both had a little like I had a spill and you dropped some makeup, and then we both showed up with this our favorite. Yeah, this is my favorite evil eye necklace, and you're wearing your evil eye necklace. It's just like the world is paralleling right now, even though we're thousands of miles away.
I think that the message, as I named, is that we are too big for any containers, and and
Yeah.
we just, when life hands you any kind of lemon, it's like, just not just make lemonade, but let's just embrace, again, the unknown. The idea of wabi sabi, the beautiful and the broken, is an idea that I work with all the time. Like there's a beauty in breaking. As Leonard Cohen also says, that's how the light gets in. And not only do we need to, I think, embrace more of the brokenness, but look for the hidden wholeness. Like there's a hidden wholeness. That Mobius strip that connects the inside and the outside has a wholeness. And so I appreciate you, Ashley. Yes, it's been a long time coming, and we can come together as our full selves. You are a joy to talk with, to be with in person and over digital tech. And I feel completely just present with you right now. And everyone listening, what a true joy. Thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin. This has been an amazing conversation, and I cannot wait for it to go live. I think it's a perfect timing, and it's a really good note to end
Yeah.
on. So thank you again for your work, and I look forward to seeing what you do next. And it's always incredible.
Likewise, let's have a part two soon,
Let's do
okay?
it. All right. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.